Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking beyond the business headlines by giving you in-depth perspective on the stories that are affecting all of us. Coming up on today's show, almost a year since President Jovenel Moise was assassinated in his home by armed men. Rise in violence and a 3-year-old recession has made the situation in Haiti dire for its citizens. The country's ambassador to the United Kingdom, Uvad Santomand, will be joining me in the studio to provide some context to the alarming headlines. And the lack of investment into Africa's oil and gas sector has led to a sharp decline in production. Finding new ways to galvanise the market is likely to form part of the discourse at the upcoming Africa Energy Week. Kola Karim, chairman of the board of directors at Shoreline Natural Resources, will be joining me from Lagos for some insights into the gathering. Then later, former British Minister for Europe Denis McShane will join me in the studio for his assessment on the state of British politics. Before we hear from Mr McShane, let's remind ourselves of this week's sequence of events for those who haven't been keeping up with the scandal engulfing Downing Street. On Monday, the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady, informed the media that the threshold had been met to trigger a vote of confidence into Prime Minister Boris Johnson's leadership. Later that evening, Tory MPs voted by 211 to 148 to keep Boris Johnson as party leader and Prime Minister. Despite the underwhelming victory, according to a flash poll conducted by YouGov, 60% of Britons want the Prime Minister to leave office.
I think they've started the process, which needs some time for reflection, since the general position seems to be who follows, but I don't think that is a good enough reason not to get rid of somebody who appears to be unfit for the office and, frankly, is a stranger to the truth.
Perhaps when there's no obvious person that you can say they are better than Boris, well, the devil you know rather than the devil you don't.
In some ways I feel sorry for him because, you know, the country's never gone through a pandemic or left the EU before. But the party thing, everyone's been fined and he was just drinking wine. So, yeah, it's pretty poor.
Earlier, I spoke with our business correspondent Simon Pusey in Westminster for some analysis. Simon, to say it's been a tough week for the Prime Minister is a huge understatement, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I think in Prime Minister's questions this week in the building behind us, the one thing that Boris had going for him was that he wasn't being booed or heckled by his own side. They've had the vote, albeit he won, but not by a massive majority. I think that's what he's got going for him. The last few weeks, he's had questions from his own side telling him that he needs to resign, at least now, even though quite a few MPs, 4 in 10 of his own MPs, are unhappy with him and didn't want him to be in the job. He is in the job and he's got a year's breathing space now. They can't have another vote like that for another year. So I guess there's a little bit of leeway there in terms of his job because it's much harder to unseat him now. But of course, he was being attacked by Labour and by the SNP and by other politicians who in the House were saying it's ridiculous that you're trying to continue when you've got so little support from within your own party. I think what he's trying to do to get around this is to unveil a new policy on housing. He's calling it From Benefits to Bricks. It's to help people get on the the housing ladder that don't have enough money that usually. And I think that's what has worked for him in the past. So with Ukraine and the Ukraine war, he's taken a lead undoubtedly in that. And President Zelensky saying he's very happy to see his main ally still there, which I think was a boost to him as well, because obviously President Zelensky is very, very popular. So I think those kind of policies will really help Boris Johnson move on from this scandal. The problem is that this scandal will continue. There will be new photos coming out. There will be more revelations. There will be things.
More probes.
Exactly, and things that he doesn't help himself, like when he was in 10 Downing Street saying, I'd do it all again, when he was trying to keep the MPs on side, and then it comes out he's going to do this all again. That whole scandal, he would do it again. He doesn't help himself sometimes, but I'm sure there will be more scandals because it is Boris Johnson. And he's someone who sort of acts on impulse. He doesn't necessarily think ahead. But the problem is, for Conservative MPs and for the opposition, it's really hard to unseat him now. What's going to happen is going to have to happen in the ballot box, probably, when an election is called, and there are local elections coming up.
Yes,
then it'll be really interesting. By-elections, it'll be really interesting to see those 2 by-elections, what happens there. If the Conservatives lose both of those seats, then I think quite a few Conservative MPs who voted for him might be a little bit worried and might be thinking maybe we made the wrong decision, because Boris Johnson's popularity across the country at the moment isn't good. Certainly nowhere near it was when he was first elected.
Gosh, we'll have to wait and see. Thank you, Simon. Let's change gears now. News this week that 6 male members of a Haitian Special Olympics contingent went missing from a US soccer competition has once again shone a spotlight on the dire socio-economic situation in the country. According to development agencies, incidents of kidnapping for ransom have increased dramatically in the past few months, and the economy has been in recession for over 3 years. The assassination of President Jovenel Moise remains a mystery more than 12 months on. His death plunged the country into further turmoil. Earlier, I was joined in the studio by Haiti's ambassador to the United Kingdom, Ouvard Saint-Amand. Your Excellency, Ouvard Saint-Amand, thank you so much for joining me in the Channel's Business Global studio again. I did speak to you before the pandemic, and it's always exciting speaking to any senior diplomat from Haiti because there's such a mystery, I would say, about the country, particularly for those of us of African heritage living in the UK, living in the West, where we know that the media is sometimes, quite frankly, whitewashed. So it is an absolute pleasure and an honour. Let's start with Independence Day, Flag Day. In your speech, you spoke of freedom, justice, inclusion and equality. Are ordinary Haitians enjoying these freedoms at the moment?
First of all, Juliana, it's always a pleasure, and the pleasure is really mine to be here again today at Channel TV and spread the words out in the name of Haiti. Getting back to that Flag Day, we were very thrilled to celebrate on May 18, 18 of May last month, the 219th anniversary of our flag. So as much as Haiti is unknown by some people, but as old as the country been. So we are old. My job is really to make the country known, to put the words out. Like you said, the Haitians are very proud of the blue and red stripes with the weapon of freedom, which considered as the inside, the deep inside, the deep soul of this of the Haitians. So we started with the values of freedom, dignity for every human being, and that's what we will continue to do, and that's why I'm here to let the people know that there's a country in the Caribbean, a Caribbean country, who started to put out those values.
Absolutely. We'll get into more of those values shortly. Again, I'm feasting upon your knowledge today. Some Pan-African commentators say the story of Haiti's independence is the black story of independence. Do you agree?
Yes, indeed. We are very proud that our story is really, the African countries can make our story their story, because most of the slaves in the 16th century, when that started, in Haiti and all the Caribbean and America really, were from Africa, from African countries. So we are African descent, and as such, we are, like I said, very proud every time that, like I'm here talking with different, different countries in Africa, where I can. They can feel that this is another African descent, even though we are very far away from Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to some of the headlines a lot of our audience will be familiar with, according to the UN agency, there were 200 kidnappings in Haiti last month. And they've been quoted as saying that armed violence has become unimaginable and intolerable. What is the true scale of the insecurity crisis on the ground right now?
Yeah, no, security has been a problem. Security is a threat for the economy and even for the social values that we are projecting.
Some would say it's out of control.
I would not say so, because the authorities are taking some serious measures now to cope with insecurity. But we have to admit that some part of the capital, Port-au-Prince, has been a problem, has been an issue starting last year since the assassination of the president. Meanwhile, or notwithstanding, our country, the countrysides of Haiti, the provinces, they are very safe. Like the northern part, Cap-Haïtien, Port-de-Paix, Jacmel, we can say the capital of the tourism of Haiti are really very safe. But we have to admit that we have to take action in Port-au-Prince to make it safer.
But can the people of Haiti trust the security services? And, I don't say this with a judgmental finger because there are similar issues in Nigeria. Can the people of Haiti trust that those who are supposed to be looking for them are, and they've not been bought out?
Even I would say security measures are never enough in capital like Port-au-Prince, where people are coping with, like, as you know, and we cannot hide that, they are coping with bad situation in life. Inflation, which is a world issue right now. So they're never enough, but the authorities, the best thing is that the authorities are conscious about the issue.
You mentioned, Your Excellency, the assassination of the president. Shocking
yes, very
incident.
Shocking.
Are you able to shed some light on the ongoing investigation?
We'll say it's kind of slow, but
why?
We don't know. Maybe, there's no perfect crime, but sometimes people planned the crimes in a way that make it difficult for authorities to shed light on it, like you said. But the international, the regional, and the national organizations or government are working together to bring some light to find who the perpetrators were.
So there's nobody that's been arrested?
Some people have been arrested. In Haiti, there are more than 20 or 30 people in prison now waiting for justice. And also in the U.S., some of the people that have been accused of the crime are also in prison, are also facing justice. So we're going slowly, but surely on a way, on the path to find who perpetrated that crime.
Yes,
last year, almost 1 year.
It's almost such an awful murder, and do please keep us updated on that. I don't want to end on a negative note.
Yes.
So talk to me, Your Excellency, about some of the things that are inspiring you and how your portfolio in Britain is helping those back in Haiti.
Let me tell you, I'm thrilled to announce that, for example, you remember last time I told you education is one of the major element of my portfolio, I'm thrilled to announce that at Oxford University on June 17th, they will start with Haitian studies.
Oh, wow.
Studying culture, politics, geography,
God, that's huge.
History.
That's huge.
They will, and I will be the first.
You'll be cutting the ribbon in the department.
Definitely.
Will you be teaching?
The first guest speaker.
Oh, you're the first,
I will be the first guest speaker, cutting the ribbon, like you said.
But it is always a pleasure to speak to you. I think, there are a lot of people that are rooting for the success of Haiti, and I'm sure you feel that energy, as you said, anytime you meet any Africans at home or abroad. Your Excellency, Ouvrard Saint-Amand, the Haitian ambassador to the United Kingdom, thank you so much for joining me in the studio today.
Thank you for the invitation, and it's always a pleasure and an honor to talk to you, yourself personally, and your audience in general.
Coming up on Channel's Business Global, I'll be getting more analysis on the political future of Boris Johnson from the former Minister for Europe, Denis McShane, and I'll be looking ahead to the second edition of Africa Energy Week with Kola Karim, Chairman of the Board of Directors at Shoreline Natural Resources. All of this after the break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Olayinka, from our studios here in London. Heads of states, energy sector ministers and industry stakeholders are preparing to participate in the second edition of Africa Energy Week, which is due to be held in Cape Town in October. Participants have said that exploring the role oil will play in making energy poverty a thing of the past on the continent by 2030 will be one of the key talking points. Driving more investment into the sector is also a key objective. Kola Karim, Chairman of the Board of Directors of Shoreline Natural Resources, joins me now from Lagos for more on this. Kola Karim, it's a pleasure to have you on Channel's Business Global today. Let's start with the war in Europe. How has Russia's invasion of Ukraine disrupted the African oil market?
Thank you for having me. I think the effect on the African oil market is in two sections, right? The first one is African oil producers are seeing very good spike in prices globally, which is in turn affecting their dollar receivables, which is helping them. But the big problem is most of these African countries are also reliant on importing petroleum products, which is costing them. And in some cases, more like Nigeria, there's huge subsidies having to go to this market as well. So it is a big problem because it's caused a huge dislocation in what Nigeria is receiving and what it's spending in subsidizing petroleum products into the market.
Yeah, it is a huge problem. Wait till you get back to London. Petrol prices have reached over £100 a litre. That's a big story here. I presume in the upcoming African Energy Week, Kola, that this disruption is going to be part of the discussions. What else are some of your peers in the sector going to be talking about at the event in October in Cape Town?
I think the big question that's been on everyone's lips over the last year is decarbonization, net zero. And this is a big thing. Why? It's affecting capital providers who are the main people funding oil and gas exploration and production on the continent. And if you look at most of the African countries with natural resources, talking from Senegal, Egypt, Algeria, Nigeria, Angola, this is a big problem. If capital providers are facing restrictions in taking opportunities in investing or supporting fossil fuel production, we have a big problem. And this is got to be a huge topic in Cape Town, with all heads together, trying to find a resolve in a middle line resolve that will help spur the growth and supporting these African producers.
I've got to say, I was shocked actually to read that there is a lack of investment in Africa's oil sector. We have heard from the BP and Shell bosses, according to Bernard Looney, the peak is over for oil. Would you agree?
I'm not sure that is correct, because the reality is, do we have, let me put it this way, post-pandemic, the consumption and demand is coming back. If you look at factories in China are coming back. People are traveling all over again. So you're talking about demand in aviation fuel is increasing. Economies are opening up left, right, and center. So the demand curve is high and the supply curve is being static and in some cases going down. That's why we see these very high prices. I just looked at the prices before I came on. We're talking about $123.27 a barrel of oil and going up. The more we keep seeing this and capital providers are restricted, we have a problem. Remember, global oil and gas production, there's a natural decline curve of about 5% a year. Pre-pandemic, from 2020 to 2022, where there's this push, there has been less or no investment in improvement or keeping oil and gas flowing. Because of that, production is reducing. That's got to be a problem. Someone's got to fill the gap in providing capital and finance to make sure we can plug the hole and keep production going.
Kola Karim, CEO of Shoreline Energy International. Thank you so much for your time on Channel's Business Global today. Thanks, Kola. Before we go, let's continue with our discussion on the future of Boris Johnson's premiership. Amid testy exchanges at Prime Minister's questions during the week, the Conservative leader vowed to carry on despite mounting calls for him to resign.
Can the Prime Minister explain if 148 of his own backbenchers don't trust him, why on earth should the country?
Prime Minister.
Well, I of course picked up political opponents all over the place, and that is because this government has done some very big and very remarkable things which they did not necessarily approve of. And what I want her to know is that absolutely nothing and no one, least of all her, is going to stop us with getting on for delivering for these people.
Former Minister for Europe Denis McShane joined me in the studio earlier for his assessment on the embattled leader. Denis McShane, always a pleasure. So, is Boris Johnson going to resign?
I don't think so at the moment, but can Boris Johnson stay as Prime Minister until the next election? I don't think that for a moment. We're in this very funny period when he won't go, his party isn't quite ready to push him out. He reminds me, I don't know if you know Russian history, a man called Rasputin, who was the sort of chief advisor and prime minister to the Tsar of Russia just before the revolution. I mean, a completely irresponsible, bad man. And they tried to kill him. They stabbed him, they poisoned him, they threw him in the river in the middle of St. Petersburg, and he kept coming back until finally, in the end, they did in for him. Now, I don't want anybody to do in for Boris, but Boris is like that. He is just never, ever going to accept, and he never has in his entire life, that he's ever made a mistake, he's ever told a lie, he's ever behaved shabbily, unfaithfully to women, he's ever let his team down. He just isn't in his nature. He comes up with a joke and a quip, but I think the jokes are getting pretty thin now.
They are getting pretty thin. I was expecting more of the muted response from Tory backbenchers in the House of Commons during PMQs this week. That didn't happen. They seem to have accepted that that was the result and they will move on. Do you agree?
No. Okay. Prime Minister's Question Time, I took part in many, many of them, obviously. That is when you rah-rah around the leader. It's like in the football dressing room before a match, the manager comes in and says, we're going to kill them, we're going to get them, rah, yeah. That's exactly what PMQs is. And you never give any pleasure to your opponents. Prime Minister's Questions. Ignore that. I mean, I've been playing tennis since the vote in the morning with MPs, including a good number of Tories. They all know he is not going to last much longer. How much longer? Don't know, but there's no enthusiasm. Nobody Tory I know or a meeting or talking to says he's still going to be a wonderful Prime Minister. He can still win the next election.
We've got some by-elections coming up, Wakefield, Tiverton and Honiton. We won't explain why those are taking place. Those who follow the show will understand why. Will a vote against Conservatives be the tipping point?
It will certainly help. I can tell you as an MP, when you lose a big by-election, especially in an ultra-safe seat, 20,000 majority in the West Country, in Tiverton as it's called. If that's won by the Lib Dems, and I think it will be, that is a terrible shock, because all the MPs around us say, oh, could that be me if I keep sticking with Boris Johnson? The other one in Wakefield is what's called a red wall seat, traditionally a Labour seat. It was won by the Conservatives in 2019, and now there will be a by-election, and if that goes back to Labour, that's the end of the idea that Boris Johnson has got a magic touch with the working class, with the North, with so-called red wall voters.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see, won't we? Denis, before you go, the last time we spoke, you hinted at possible successors of Boris Johnson. People have said there doesn't appear to be anybody.
That's complete, forgive me, that is such rubbish. I mean, again, I'm quoting the colleagues, I mean, I'm Labour guy, I mean, they're Tories, and they just laugh at that. Of course, when a Prime Minister goes, for whatever reason, blow me down, we have a new one very, very quickly indeed.
Denis McShane, former Minister for Europe, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Thank you. Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today, but as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.